Yeah, thank you for your introduction, Ferris, and for hosting tonight's conversation. 2013, wow, I was just a child then, I swear. This is just a reminder that I'll be signing books after the talk. We've only got about, I guess half of them are sold. There's only like 15 copies left or something, but Tola is taking pre-orders that can be inscribed for you once they're received. Wow, I wasn't really sure how the reception would be for the expanded edition of Fire Island Modernist. Second editions aren't always like much of an event. It's just kind of a passion project just to keep the information out there. As it turns out, the entire print run sold out in a month and it's already been reprinted. So I'm really grateful to everyone who helped make that happen. I want to reserve most of the time tonight talking with Charles about the future, but I'll start with a quick summary of what's new in the expanded edition. We got a little hum here? Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought moving it away would help. Amateurs. Meaning me. Well, for starters, the entire text has been edited and I've amended my introduction. So I wrote about Richard Avedon, who arrived in the Grove in 1946, where he partied mightily while conceiving his first magazine cover for Harper's Bazaar. I first came by this courtesy of the Pines Historical Society, and its illustrious leader, John Dempsey, is editing an upcoming art historical survey of Fire Island, which Phaeton is publishing next year. So I've seen some previews of it and really can't wait to read the whole thing. As for newly featured homes, we've got Charles Renfro's house, which was a rather forlorn affair at the time of the first publication. Our last photo shoot for the expanded edition took place at Charles's Labor Day party, and seen here. In recent shoots, I really try to include people in the photos, and it's especially resonant out here because when many of these homes were first published in the 60s and 70s, the actual gay occupants were intentionally edited out. There's even an Earl Combs house, his own house, that Playboy published, and the magazine filled it full of buxom blonde women. I've also added the Dell house, which is the first Horace Gifford home I ever encountered, circa 2003. One issue that made this house very difficult to photograph circa 2011 was that it was filled to the rafters with the owner's porcelain pig collection. This is the Schultz house, handsomely restored several years ago. And like a lot of Gifford homes, there's a terrific sex scandal attached to this one, which you can read all about. And the Rubrum house, which sadly only existed for a few years before it washed out to sea. And the Moss Forstad house, which was the last Fire Island project that Gifford worked on. It was originally designed in the 60s, but after a fire, he rebuilt it and added a fourth vault in 1989. Along with newly included houses, there's a lot more photography of the homes that we showed in the first edition. An example of this is the Lipkins house. I wasn't allowed to photograph the interior of this place at the time of the first edition, and the current owners were still shy about it this time because they hadn't yet refinished the floors at the time of the shoot. Everything had to be perfect. But I was able to convince Ned and Michael that black and white photography would conceal any minor sins. And they lend a nice vintage feel to the photos. And last but certainly not least, Charles's new afterword entitled Productive Escapism, which is my favorite part of the book. And I will hand this to you. Oh. You just press the right hand.
So let's see. I'm gonna manhandle this thing. If I can. Okay, so Chris asked me to write the afterword, which I was super happy to do. And you, of course, should buy the book. I'm not going to tell you what's in the afterword, but it leans into nature, I should say, and also Gifford's houses lean into nature. The thing that I love about Gifford's houses is they don't exist. What exists are the people in it and the trees around it. that's what makes Gifford houses spectacular, is their nothingness. And so my house in particular, which is one of the three like this one, that's Gifford standing there, is a stage. I call it a stage. Every room empties out onto the main central room. You cannot go pee. Well, you can, never mind. I won't get into that. But the sun isn't down yet. Anyway, you have to go to the bathroom. You have to go through the middle rooms. You go to leave the house. Everybody passes through that main room, whether you like it or not. You're part of the production of your life. And that life is about community. These houses make community. And that's what I love about them so much. And I think they also taught us to be proud of ourselves as gay men, mostly gay men and lesbians and other freaks of nature, because these houses believed in nature so much and embedded themselves in nature so much and supported our lifestyle so much that all of a sudden we became renaturalized. We were not freaks of nature. We actually were part of nature, and I attribute that in large part to Gifford's. The fact that he let us become one with nature. Step on the sand when you go out the door of your house. Have the trees in your room. I don't know what else is in here, but yeah, this is that same view, same house. You can see it's virtually no different. Although I've added some art and I added a modern kitchen, but essentially it's there to disappear. And that's one of the things I love so much about Gifford. And here's another version of I forget the name of that house, but still, you see right through it.
Bonaguidi one.
Thank you. You see right through it, and you see trees popping up through it. It's literally shuffled together with green space and with nature. And I try to, in the renovation that I've made with my partner, my husband, Daniel Gortler, and housemates Alice Galan and Daniel Kapp. But really early in the day, we try to expand the house without touching it. And so what we did is we made a ghost house outside in the back of the house with the deck that Chris showed, pool that I'm sure a lot of you people have been in. But the idea was to let that house still be kind of nothing in a way. It's a postage stamp. It sort of disappears. And then to make the new spaces be all about living your life collectively. And so that's what I very much believe in. FIPOA asked me to help them with the Fire Island AIDS Memorial. This is a very, very preliminary sketch of what it might do. But this is sort of a lead-in to what I'm going to show at the end of this talk, and after Chris has another round. But in thinking about design in this place, and in thinking about the AIDS Memorial in particular, I didn't want to make a piece of architecture. I wanted to make a piece of nature somehow. And what this does, if this comes to fruition, is it reflects the sound of the ocean back at you. It's a whisper wall. That's all it is. There's no text on it. It's not big enough for more than 10 people to gather at once, so the size of a house. Many of the people who succumbed to AIDS, their ashes were thrown in the ocean. So this is a kind of, it's almost kind of like a tombstone. That's a terrible way to put it, but it's an interactive place where you feel the island, you feel the nature, you smell the trees, you hear the waves, and I think approaches like this and others, I suppose, might lead us to a Fire Island architecture which is different and new. Anyway, I'm going to hand this back over to you.
All right. Actually, I've got my own.
Oh yeah.
I just need the clicker.
Sorry. Clicker.
I just wanted to start. This is a house in Cornet Estates, a little community elsewhere on Fire Island, originally designed by Gifford in 1967. But then he altered it significantly 4 years later, inserting a series of volumes in his new kind of curvilinear mode. And he returned to alter several of his projects. And when I would interview Gifford's colleagues, such as Harry Bates, it was really remarkable how kind of unsentimental they were, lighthearted even about their own work. And I try to channel that sensibility when I'm engaging with these houses as an architect. Obviously understand them deeply and viscerally, but don't be afraid to make a modern house kind of adapt to a new era. And in an era of climate change, this adaptation can be the thing that actually saves it. This is one of my favorite Gifford homes. It's composed of two canted ellipses around a diamond-shaped living room, all reached by an itty-bitty spiral stair. I did a bit of stabilizing work for the original clients about 10 years ago, but its new owners wanted to see it through its next 50 years. And they're really operating in a much different environment than Gifford did. Before we even get to a philosophy regarding preservation, just following current code entails making substantial changes, including often raising the house. In the model above, the gray areas are sort of existing and the brown areas are new. When you add, and so like another thing that happens when you add amenities like swimming pools or air conditioning, you're also adding the mechanical equipment. And done without care, they tend to sort of litter these very sculptural, minimalist, kind of nothing houses like a junkyard. And so some of it is about really concealing these. So in this case, that big deck was held up on little metal poles. So we basically put in a scrimmed structure underneath the giant deck to hide the mechanical equipment on the one hand, and then you get other utilities, washer and dryer, outdoor shower on the other. There you get these sort of two semicircular enclosures, but the main sort of vision of the house is left intact. We're also living in a different environment now in terms of the heights of neighboring houses and the tree canopy. So features like roof decks that rarely appeared in 1972 because they didn't need to, you could see the water out your living room, are now basically a nearly required amenity. Here are some views which reveal, on the one hand, how surgical we're trying to be with these interventions, but on the other hand, almost nothing is untouched if you're building to current codes. So this is a really beautiful, one of my favorite Gifford houses, again, in the Pines on Bay Walk. And, it really is the house has since been raised, it had to be. But tucking a house into the dunes was really a favorite technique of Gifford's. And this visceral connection with nature is really part of their appeal. But FEMA has other thoughts about this. The lowest horizontal structural member of the house, basically the floor supports, now needs to be a few feet above what's called a 100-year flood event. FEMA basically wants water to surge under your house and back out again without too much resistance in the form of rigid walls and interior living space. This gets tricky if, say, you're adding on to a house, the existing house is low, the new structure needs to be high, and so it's a bit of a dance to harmonize them. On sites where the difference is just a few feet, basically you can kind of mitigate it. This is one of our early Fire Island projects, a new pool house that had to sit several feet above an existing deck. A bleacher-like arrangement of built-in benches and planters kind of eases that transition between these levels. A similar strategy is occurring at a house we're renovating that's popularly known as the Calvin Klein House after its most famous occupant. You've all probably seen it walking down the beach. It's 566 Driftwood Walk. The new guest house that we're doing on the west side needs to be higher than the restored pool deck. And this is just like a detail of the guest house. And these sort of bleachers are also a handy spot to conceal like hoses and cushions and other accessories. And this is a sort of mitigation that works fine on existing houses that are only slightly lower than FEMA standards. Lower lying sites are another matter. Now, none of these houses are in the Pines because I don't want to like pick on any single homeowner for a house that's simply following current codes. But the houses that were raised during the 2019 beach restoration and new construction are kind of rapidly taking us in the direction of these examples. And my concern with this is that it's leading, in many cases, to a rather bleak experience when you're traversing the boardwalks of the Pines. For a place that prides itself on its sense of community, these very aloof homes don't exactly proclaim, welcome. On Fire Island, people have always built houses on a grid of pilings. which are then cross-braced with like thick wooden planks. And that was fine when the houses were 3 feet off the ground. But our new reality suggests that we consider some alternative approaches, and that the base of the house becomes just as considered as the living space above it. As is so often the case, when I'm looking for inspiration, I revisit the Horace Gifford archives. He designed this house in 1968 for a flood-prone site in Bridgehampton. So it was sort of like climate change before climate change. It was partially inspired by a home in Florida, which faced similar challenges. And instead of a grid of pilings, he created what is essentially a bridge. And this really just got me thinking, what if we built our houses more like bridges and less like bunkers? What if we could look through these houses to water and nature views that are shared with the public? What if we activated this ground floor space currently covered in pilings to create front porches and party venues? I set myself the task of designing a house on a typical 60 by 100 foot lot that would meet all current codes and be constructible using current technologies. I mentioned before that FEMA regulations do not allow us to have living space on the ground plane anymore. However, you can locate decks and pools there as long as they're right at ground level. So that's what you see here, basically a fully in-ground pool and a deck. Instead of wood pilings, the in-ground portions of the structure are made of precast concrete, so they'll never rot. Above ground, the pilings transition to wood, and if the house ever needs to go even higher or even move, there's a Lego-like connection between the concrete and the wood to facilitate this. Instead of a grid of pilings, the pilings are clustered at the edges in L shapes, a bit like opened books for lateral stability. They're cross-braced and clad in zinc panels, forming fireproof and maintenance-free structural towers. I like zinc because it has the same very kind of matte and tactile texture, kind of similar to the cedar out here. The wood siding cladding the rest of the house can take advantage of immersion fire retardant coatings. The first floor is a volume extending north to south. It's a bit like a townhouse with a dining room facing the boardwalk and a kitchen, living room, and deck facing the ocean. A dumbwaiter connects the living level with the ground floor outdoor space. The second floor is a volume extending east to west. This slide shows just part of the second floor, and it's basically, I'm trying to indicate that while a totally prefabricated house presents pretty big difficulties because of the boardwalks out here, we could start building portions of the structure, like say bathrooms and insulated wall panels off island, and build in a kit of parts manner. 3 equal bedrooms with a shared deck face the ocean. On the boardwalk side, a door leads to a spiral stair and a parapet roof that conceals the mechanical equipment. On the roof, there's a catwalk that passes an extensive solar array en route to a cantilevered roof deck. And here's a finished view of the house from the southeast. Most new pools are tiny in part because there's no room after you create a house and some decks. So this pool slides partially under the balcony to steal some lot coverage without increasing the overall footprint. The upper volume provides, meaning the second floor, provides deep east and west shading for the first level, which helps to maintain interior comfort. And here's just a cross-section of the house cutting through the foyer. And at the upper right, you can see the parapet wall that conceals all of the mechanical equipment, which, as you probably can guess, is one of my big bugaboos out here, my pet peeves. Charles is a much purer soul than most of you. He has no air conditioning in his house.
I don't have bug screens.
You don't
I don't have bug screens. I don't have air
Amazing.
conditioning or bug screens.
On the left, this is an overhead view, which gives some sense of the tight zoning envelope that we're required to work with. Lots can only be 35% covered. A lot of you, as you've bought a house or tried to renovate one, you find that you're 48% lot coverage, and you hire an architect who tells you your house is going to be smaller after you've paid $1 million to fix it. And that's where we're at now. It's no longer the Wild West. 35% coverage, 20-foot setback on the front and rear, 12-foot setbacks on the side yards. Fire Island's vernacular is generally a spare one. Our houses are basically about solids and voids, light and shadow, views to nature. And it can be tempting, working within these pretty tight zoning envelopes to just kind of pack everything into an undifferentiated 2.5-story box. 28 feet is our height limit above the structure. But pushing and pulling the volumes are really what will provide both visual interest and a pleasing variety of spaces. So I think there's still some fun to be squeezed out of the restrictions that are imposed upon us.
And what's his Instagram?
It is supposed to be the architecture of seduction, right? This is the roof deck, which is a fairly intimate space so that solar panel exposure can be maximized. But the spiral stair up the back that leads to a catwalk also gives it kind of a grand processional quality. It's a great place to sort of display your chosen outfit for tea. This image collects all of the floor plans so you can kind of see how they relate to one another. John Clifford, I know this is going to be your favorite slide since you're a plan obsessive. Ground floor, again, it's just kind of a flexible space with utility and storage cores that are pushed to the perimeter. First floor, dining room hovers towards the boardwalk, kind of like to give like a lantern-like presence at night. The living area and kitchen are designed for maximum sociability. On the second floor, everyone gets a comfortable oceanfront room with a sort of shared Eva Perón balcony. On the subject of bedrooms, I sort of, look, the real estate brokers love it when all the bedrooms are the same for rental purposes, but I think there's also something to be said about, there's a certain democratic quality of that. So even if you're staying with friends who own the house, you sort of feel like everyone is sort of equal. And so, I think you can have differentiated bedrooms, but it's always nice when everyone feels like they have an equal level of grandeur, I think. That's part of an architecture of community. And then the roof deck, of course, is a rather phallic space. I couldn't help myself, where everyone gets to be a supermodel. And these are just, this is the beachfront elevation. West facade, which has a secondary egress stair down to the ground floor or ground level. Boardwalk elevation. And the entry elevation. And going back to this image, one thing you might have noticed that I do not show in these illustrations is a giant fence. And I'd like to gently nudge people to go easy on their fencing. It can be a little disappointing to come to a place known for its natural beauty, only to walk past a series of solid walls. And look, people are required to fence in their swimming pools, though these need not be tall or opaque. And there's new pool covers equipped with sensors that even let you dispense with pool fences. The New York State Code still has the fencing requirement on the books, but we can expect that that's going to be revisited as they kind of encounter this new technology. Now, none of what I'm showing here is meant to be overly prescriptive. It's just kind of my personal take on how we can really just embody the best values of Fire Island architecture, hopefully without embalming them. We're fortunate to have many examples to provide a point of departure in renovating or creating your own home. But you can also look beyond that, and now Charles is going to show you a house he designed in East Hampton.
Okay, so super different, but a beach house nonetheless. East Hampton is a community with roads, so you can get big heavy things out to sites like steel and whatnot. There's also a lot of money, I guess. Mm-hmm. That's one thing. I mean, there's plenty here. And I love that it's not that visible, here. And I love the modesty of much of what we see here belies kind of, a wealth that really is present in the community. but I think we all have a wealth of living. We know how to live wealthily, and without having to spend a ton of money. Anyway, I had a client. Her name was Julie Taubman, and she was based in Detroit. She's a big design collector and photographer. She made a book on Detroit, big thick book, the compendium essentially of Detroit's architecture. And she had gone through 4 different architects on her way to DSNR and fired them for, these are big names, because she just didn't think they got the site, they got her, and the last one, actually, the bulldozers had arrived to the site. The previous architect, very well regarded, and I like this architect very much. And I could just imagine her in a jumpsuit, got up in front of the bulldozers. She's like, "Stop! Stop!" They literally stopped the bulldozers the day they were starting construction. Thank God. And then she found me through a mutual friend, and we got on really well. And so what we did for Julie, which was different than what we did here, Julie and Bobby Taubman, is we really looked at the place, and you'll see that a bit more, where we are and where it is. We looked at the place as very different. So I like to think of like Gifford and what's happened here with mid-century modern. I write about this in the bit I wrote in the book. Modernism was a little bit of a cipher or a Trojan horse. It was a way for, it doesn't have any historic references, it's modern, it's respectable, and it was another way that we were able to come out here and live new lives, because modernism was new at that time, and we could make life new in modernism, and make our lives in modernism. And so I really respect that, and deep down, I am a modernist architect, very much so, like really, rectilinear. And so what I'm about to show you, which some of you probably know already, was a stretch for me. But I think it offers a different way to think about building. No, that is not it. This is the site. Our client was very gay friendly. It's on 2 Mile Hollow, at the beach at 2 Mile Hollow. If you've been to the Hamptons, you probably know that's the gay beach. And so they used to fly the rainbow flag even after the town of East Hampton put a baby changing station in the parking lot of 2 Mile Hollow Beach so that the gays wouldn't cruise. Did it stop us? Julie bonded by putting the flag there after the baby changing station. So anyway, we had this really kind of weird site. So there's the parking lot where they put the baby changing station, and then there's our site. It's really, really strange. Pointed, southerly. You can't really get a stretch of window looking to the water, even though it's considered a waterfront site. But most importantly, I think this is really one of the distinguishing factors in East Hampton from here, is that red line represents 20 feet above sea level. So that means that we didn't have to do stilts, we didn't have to raise, but it did really restrict the site that we could work on. So our first interrogation, the thing that drove us to the basics of our form, was an analysis of the views, the bad views, the good views, the morning view, the evening view, to avoid someone's 10,000 foot Cape Codder in the back, and then even though the parking lot isn't the worst thing to look at, we try to avoid that too. So the house essentially is a viewfinder in every which way, north, south, east, west, up and down. And on top of that, we wanted it to be made very much like the Ace Memorial I showed now, made of the nature of the site, made of the site. And this is another analysis slide showing how high you had to get up to see the ocean, even in your oceanfront site, and how limiting the site restriction is, 27 feet. I think it's similar here,
Yeah.
Something like that. So we had 15 feet to work at, and it's sort of hard to make a fancy house in 15 feet, but that's sort of what we tried to do.
Oh, shoot.
I did something bad. No, nothing to say. So. Okay. My house is going. Okay. And so the idea was to make the house out of the dunescape itself, to literally actually cast. We were going to cast the house in concrete shells in lost form method. So we would pile up sand on the beach and then cast and then take the sand away. And that sounded so sustainable and really cool, but all the sand would have to have been brought in from elsewhere and taken back. Like, you're not allowed to use the sand on your own site to make your house with. So that sort of idea got killed. However, it led us to the resulting idea, which was previously called the ravioli scheme. This is essentially just sort of mimicking the dunes of the site. And what this was kind of related to Gifford, was to make one big, meandering, flowing level without any doors, without any sense of privacy, that would be sandwiched between two bedroom planes, each of them having a pocket, sort of ravioli of bedroom spaces, private spaces. And those two really don't have doors. You have to go downstairs or upstairs to find yourself in those private areas. And so the idea was that it would completely blend in, with the site, which, I mean, it doesn't, but you can see the attempt was there. And this just shows how little we had to work with to get up to get the view and to be below the 27-foot max. And so what we did was, so that the middle floor here, it just meanders from the entry point, and it flows upward in a series of terraces. They're all linked together. And even though that floor is a full floor above that floor, the whole thing links together and it feels like one space. You'll see an interior view in just a second. But we had to decide how to make, since we lost our concrete shell idea cast in the sand, we had to figure out how to structure this thing. And our structural engineer said, well, you can go conventional and do completely steel and do concrete bits on top. And we said, can't we be more innovative? And so we worked with an airplane manufacturer out in Seattle that makes military jets, not Boeing, but that makes military jets. We couldn't even go into the factory to see our own house being made. But we and they came up together with an idea to make the roof out of CNC milled, hyper dense foam covered in fiberglass and then sealed on the side. It's not terribly sustainable. So this is not a sustainability talk, guys. This is a formalism talk. But also innovation. So what that let us do, so that's a surfboard, basically a gymongous surfboard with an 80-foot cantilever. And we could structure it on this little steel. And so this is the house under construction, showing the kind of surfboard on top. And there is steel there, but it's about a quarter the amount of steel as it would have been had we gone with a conventional framing methodology. And you can see it is not blended into the site. It is inspired by the site. And you can see the parking lot and the baby changing station over there. But the idea was that the entire house would be made of the same surface. It all connects up together, and it's all made of. It has sand in the resin coating that goes on top, so it's literally brought some of the site into the house. This is that you can see. There's the bedrooms. One of the bedrooms up there. And this is the front door, which is a full floor lower than the living room, which is the one that has a view. And I just wanted to point out something, that the front door, you can't really see it here, but that is cast bronze. It was cast up metallics foundry, and it was made and modeled after Julie Taubman's thumbprint. And it's about this thick. It weighs like 4 cars worth of, but you can open it with literally with your thumb. Anyway, so it's a little hobbity, I guess you might say, but that wasn't the intention. It was really just the intention was to mimic the fluid forms of sand, the dynamic of sand, the flowiness of sand. And then this is what, when you walk in that front door, this is what you get, a continuous space that goes up to, that's the living room at the top. And so where we're standing, where this picture is taken, is a full floor below the living room. And so I guess it's one of the things that we might think about here in the Pines. I mean, it's hard to build on the ground floor these days, but what are the tricks we can make to counter what you said, which is that houses used to be much more generous to the boardwalk, and how do we link them all up? And what kind of spatial tricks can we use? Anyway, this is what we did here. I drew that rail about 50 times until Julie was really a thought partner on this project. This is my client, and I'll never have another kind of partner, but we would go to Detroit, and we'd go into her closet, and she'd let me try on her furs, and then we'd smoke a joint, and then I'd pull out my drawings, and she'd say, "Charles, not good enough. You can do better." And then, so this happened like 10 times with this rail, and then finally one day I drew this thing. It was a little Zaha for my taste, but whatever. She loved it. She said, "That's it, wrap it up." And that's how it went. It was a lot of fun working on this project. Every piece of furniture was custom made or custom altered for the house. So you see these Saarinen chairs, which were altered by some artist folks that Julie knew from Detroit and various places. I can't name the names of all the people. I'm in Fire Island, I don't remember anything. But these are all pretty well-known designers that contributed to the house. There's not a single right angle in the house, so it was hard to hang art. So all the art was actually made as design pieces for the house. This is a fireplace that has 3 openings, one outside, one to the dining room, and one to the living room. But it's the same fireplace, and it's split by the glass, so it's indoors and outdoors. And let's see. And this is the only little private space in the main floor, which is a study. And so it's wrapped in glass with this little platform where Bobby comes up and does his work. Julie would say, "Can I say this here? I don't know." Alex, Lon, can I say stories? I can't, right? Yeah, okay. So Alex helped me on my book. On the book of Plutarch. But we wanted this to be open without glass whatsoever. And then Julie said, "No, we can't. We have to enclose him because he screams at his employees." So that's how that became glass enclosed. Anyway, you get the picture. But we tried to blend into nature in certain ways, planting all the way to the edges of the house. And let's see, what else do we have here? Yeah, this is the pool. They are avid art collectors too, but mostly they developed things for the house. And this is it from the roof. You can see the resemblance to the bare spots in the dunes. And it works day and night, and they do come out here year-round, which is interesting. Anyway, I wanted different point of view, just as we think about how to tackle this really big legacy of modernism with its trabeated openings, big pieces of glass, square frames and vertical elements. Might there be also another kind of formal direction? I think you've talked a little bit about the necessity to make our houses more sustainable. They must be more sustainable. They can't get washed away in water. But more than that, they need to be able to transform, to move, to change. Are there other ways that other formalisms that can be brought here, perhaps, that might usher in a new era of Pines architecture? It's just a thought. It's just a provocation.
Yeah, sure.
And I think with that, I think I'm just gonna stop. And I think we're gonna open up the floor for questions. Do you have anything more?
I think that was a beautiful house, and it's interesting. Like, there's a kind of
there's a family resemblance between the AIDS memorial and
That's
this. So there's,
that was
yeah,
the,
I
that
love
was
that.
the linchpin.
I think for me, obviously I'm identified with mid-century modernism and its documentation and all of that. And I don't personally feel like super tethered to that language per se, but basically, mid-century modernism came about as a way to make good design available to the masses. And so it's a lot about kind of simplicity and efficiency. Alas, in this day and age, no middle-class person can no longer afford to build a house here. However, because of the sort of restrictions, the regulatory issues that we have, that very efficiency of mid-century modernism is still very applicable. And so even if you're not like, determined to, echo, let's say, Horace Gifford's work, it's easy to sort of end up in that vicinity. Although, I can imagine if people were to buy a larger lot or something, other languages start to become like really interestingly introduced.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah. I think, why don't I pass, can I get somebody, Ferris or someone to run this, or someone to just, if anyone has questions, they can speak into my mic? Do we have any questions?
If you want to sign contracts, I think we can make those drawn up too. I don't know what happened to that one.
I know there's got to be questions.
Hi everyone. Hopefully everyone's enjoying their weekend, first and foremost. Nice to kind of staying out of trouble. First, Charles, thank you so much for highlighting the nature, both in Gifford's work and sharing with your own. My question is for Chris. When you first started coming out to Fire Island and I guess talking about your inspirations, being out here, did you come out with the lens of I'm an architect and always soaking up what you were seeing, or were you inspired a year or two, 5 years after coming out and just having fun while being out here to, so not necessarily a technical question, but just your inspiration?
I'll just try to throw my voice. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Really, I came out for completely social reasons and knowing almost nothing about the place. And two things really stuck with me. The first was, it was the very first time I'd ever walked down a public street holding my boyfriend's hand with an absolute absence of fear. So that was impression number one, before I even got to the architecture. But number two was, there were maybe a dozen houses that I was like, why haven't I seen these in architecture school? And so one thing led to another. I thought, I should write a monograph on Horace Gifford. But the more I looked into it, the more I realized he was really this kind of portal to a whole generation that was sort of being forgotten because of AIDS and just the passage of time. So it was really just this one thing flowed into another. I see someone over there.
I can actually stand up. I don't know if you can hear me. Yes, thank you so much for this. This is wonderful. I wonder, as you have conversations with either clients or just people around the community, and you talk about the future of architecture in the Pines, to what extent does physical accessibility come into those conversations as we're having a population that is living longer? And I see, a lot of stairs. We talk about very open spaces. Sort of where those conversations lie as we talk about the future.
Yeah, I mean, it is a challenging thing out here. Single-family homes are not required to be, they don't have the same accessibility requirements as, say, multifamily construction. So you're not really bound by that in any legal sense. But yeah, I mean, I think it's case by case. But yeah, I would say it really is, we've got things like the Margie cart to sort of mitigate things. But yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that comes about with these challenges. I don't even, it's not something I've researched, but I don't even know if legally you could put an elevator below the FEMA line because it's a mechanical device. So that is really sort of where these things really kind of collide with each other. Yes, Michael.
Hey, Chris. I think these case studies are fabulous. I've seen, believe it or not, shipping containers used discreetly, even elegantly, on Ocean Beach, that side of the island.
Do you want to take this one?
I mean,
The shipping containers. Is it possible that we can use shipping containers as a part of a prefabricated system? Our friends Giuseppe and Anna at Low Tech are the kind of preeminent shipping container architects, and they've done some amazing work. And they've proven the viability of containerized living spaces. I think the problem here is what Chris mentioned, is getting them here. I mean, you couldn't bring them down the boardwalks. You may know that many houses in Cherry Grove were built on the mainland. I love that Long Island is the mainland.
Floated.
But they were floated on barges and sort of dry before there was a lot of vegetation and just pulled into place. So there's still, there's something to be looked at with other ways of getting things here, and I think Chris alluded to this in your proposed house. Is like you're thinking about the largest practicable elements that could be made elsewhere and brought in, and I think that's a really, the idea of being able to take your house down and reassemble it is a really good one, and if you're, it's like a piece comes with a piece of furniture or kind of like an automobile or something, you can take it with you. And I think that might be one of the things we need to think a bit more about without forsaking design ambition. And I think that's what Low Tech has done so well. You want to add anything?
No, that's
Okay,
good.
thanks.
Well, a little bit. Just
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, you would think you could get nothing down the boardwalks, but it's actually pretty impressive what they're able to do as long as it's skinny, basically. So, skinny things can be, managed. Yes?
I have a boring structural systems question. One big problem is the rising groundwater in septic systems.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people that are getting the big tanks may in the future have problems with how you empty those tanks. The old systems with leach fields and cinder block boxes can't be built anymore. Is there anything you are aware of or can think of that can address that problem?
I don't know about this.
Gosh, that's a little, it's something I would phone a really smart person about and say, can you figure this out for me? I'm going to be honest.
Yes?
It's interesting. I think so much of what we appreciate and sort of highlight about times is about this era of the Renfro sticker in the 60s and 70s, and a lot of the architecture happened during that time. And I don't know whether it was partly because they were free to design homes or without the regulations and the challenges that we have today. But do you think that going forward, given the costs and regulations, that like 40, 50 years from now, people will look at the homes that are being built now and appreciate them and like in the same way that we do the houses that were built 40, 50 years ago? And how do you think that will shape how people come to the island and appreciate it in the same sense of it being like architecturally designed, inspiring for like as an oasis?
Well, I certainly hope they're going to appreciate what's being built now because I'm one of the people trying to build them for starters. But no, I think we've got like benches of talent here. There's really good architects out here, and I think we expect and are getting really good things. So yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that?
I probably shouldn't. But no, I would say that it feels like God, AIDS really fucked so much up, right? I mean, just we had this glorious time, and it was great architecture, and the architect, admittedly, the modernist stuff that Gifford did was about as efficient and expensive as you could get, and with just a few flourishes. And so he really put his money where the flourishes would show, like a big ass piece of glass or something. But AIDS really kicked this place in the shin, and we were on the ground for 20, 30 years, I think, really. And I feel like finally the new generation is here. It's here, and the young people have come in. People are coming more than ever. I think the population density is probably higher than ever. It seems more than I've ever known. So I feel like it's taken a while to get our mojo back, but I think it's back. So, and I think we're all really excited. I mean, we know some people that are making some new stuff that we're thrilled about and really excited to see what this new generation of work is going to look like. And we know that it's going to reflect our contemporary here and now. And that's really what makes it good architecture, I think.
Yes, Paul?
We are continuing to see proposals for houses that are grossly larger than what the vernacular has been here. And if that's the direction for the future, that we have 24-bedroom houses, we have 8.5-bedroom houses, where the maximum that we have historically seen here are 4 and 5-bedroom houses. Is that the future of architecture here in the Pines? I mean, it seems to have community support on a certain level, and I find it important in terms of maintaining the scale, a human scale, and the scale of the nature. I mean, I find your house in the Hamptons to be abhorrent in terms of trying to...
I'm so glad you don't live there. It'd be bad for my reputation.
of trying to blend in with the environment, which you keep talking about. You see the house in plastic. I just don't understand the contradictions from your mouth and what you have created for billions of dollars, and what these developers or homeowners seem to view the direction of this community as enormous structures that are not at all consistent.
I think it.
This is a discussion. It's not a town hall meeting, kids.
Yeah.
Okay. Just saying.
Yeah, no, I think this is a really hard issue, because on the one hand, I totally get it. Like, I see these, I know probably specifically the one you're referring to, and it's not a thing of beauty. The issue is it's responding to essentially a housing crisis.
Yeah,
these people are following the market.
That's right.
Now, I'm not saying that's what everyone, but that's kind of what's happening, because we have this artificially imposed sort of situation on us zoning wise. We're not really expanding organically in the way that we would hope to. And so people are finding workarounds. And that's basically what you're seeing. They're realizing, okay, I can buy a couple lots, 1 kitchen, 1 pool, 14 bedrooms. And I'm no fan of that, but I do think it is responding to a real need, and that's where the tension lies.
Agreed. Exactly what you said.
Yes, Michael?
Yeah.
I just want to back up 1 second from your points about the regulations. Well, first, what you've shown, guys, both of you, is spectacular.
Thank you.
Thank you, both local and Charles. I very much appreciate what you've done. Carl, I respect you, but that is moving the world in an interesting direction. I do want to just comment on the regulations, and I'm not a person who is wed to regulations, but I think we need to go back 1 or 2 steps, which is not really regulations, it's the environmental sustainability of rising water, global warming. So I don't think we should blame regulations per se. We should blame what's happened to the world. And so the reason people up in need to follow certain restrictions is basically the reality of climate and the reality of the density of this island, which can't really support from its sewage programs and from its environment much more. So I do want to just sort of back up. Why do we have the regulations? We have them because we're going to be in the water soon.
Should we? Are we done?
Yeah,
What do you think?
Why don't we do one more question?
One more question?
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh no. Okay, maybe 2.
All right. Wow.
So the history of this island was that we helped, they were gonna, Robert Moses was gonna build a road to us.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it would have had a paved road, and everybody wanted it to come to their homes. My parents wanted to know, and stopping that and helping it become a national park. We're the only place in the country where you can have homes inside a national park. The beauty of this island is why we're all here. It's the connect to nature. So building these huge places that are, taking up 100-year-old trees that are wetlands are what preserve us here. How we are going to sustain this community. And it's a very unusual, rare situation. So we need to dance with it. We need to understand it and respect nature out here.
Agreed.
All right. All right. Thanks.
That's a good one.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Just one last thing, somebody just asked how they can get involved with Times March.
Donate money.
Thank you, Michael. He said donate money. Just reach out to me. Just go on the website, send me an email, and we'll see what we can put together. I've been looking for new blood, and I always feeling guilty for all the houses I haven't gotten around to putting on the site and so forth. So yeah, please reach out. Thank you.
Thank you.